of the Desert Water Agency on January 16th, 2024 at 8 o'clock to order. Just some housekeeping for those of you who are participating virtually. Please keep your speaker or your microphone muted until or unless you're ready to speak during public comment or otherwise called upon. And for those of us that are in the room today in person, if you could mute your electronic devices so that they won't interrupt us during the meeting. I will be calling on directors in roll call order for discussion and questions in the following order: Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via roll call. And with that, I would like to ask Director Gracia to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So item number 2 is roll call. We'll ask Assistant Secretary Baca to take the roll, please.
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Present.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Item 3, this would be a time for public comments on items that are not on today's agenda. If you'd like to make a public comment, please either raise your hand or come to the podium. We will ask that you keep your comments to no than 3 minutes. And before we do that, Assistant Secretary Baca, have we received any comments from the public via email or otherwise?
No comments have been received so far.
Thank you. So it appears there are no public comments for items not on today's agenda, so we'll move to item 4. Again, these would be items that are on today's agenda. If you would like to speak about an item on today's agenda at this time, you will please present yourself at the podium or raise your hand virtually, and we'll ask again that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We have somebody in the audience who's raised their hand. Sir, are you here for the item, what is it, 6A? Yeah, then we'll have a time to take comment from you then if you'd like. Okay. Yeah, you can do it now, or you could wait till we actually address that item if you like.
Okay, I'll wait till you.
Okay, thank you. Right, other than that, we'll move to item 5, which is our consent calendar. We have several items on the consent calendar today. If there are any items on the consent calendar that a director would like to pull for further discussion, please let me know.
I would. I'd like to pull 5F. There's no staff recommendation, so it's
5F, okay.
clarify what we want to do with it.
Any other items from directors? No? All right, then let's start with a discussion on item 5F, request board authorization for non-refundable expense approval according to section 3.d.a of the board director meeting expense reimbursement policy. And would that be Director Sines? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. So under the meeting expense reimbursement policy for the board of directors, there's a section 3DA that states if the board director is unable to attend an event that they had registered and the agency had paid for due to illness or emergency, at the discretion of the executive committee, the director will not be responsible for the non-refundable portion. We do have a director, Vice President Bowman, who is requesting $15.54 that was charged to him on December 14th due to the maximum overage be waived for the CRUA conference, as he had to leave early due to illness. And he was unable to attend that day. So since he was not able to attend that day, the request is that the amounts that were deducted from his maximum allowable meal allowance because they were included in the registration, it reduced the amount of his allowable amount, I believe, to like $55. And so if the executive committee were to take action to allow that to be waived, he would receive his full $100 of his daily budget, and then that $15 would be covered for. However, the policy does state that it is at the discretion of the executive committee. There is a conflict of interest as Director Vice President Bowman sits on the executive committee. So it was Director Ortega's request that this item be brought to the full board for consideration, given the conflict of interest. And then also I would like to note that we have a finance committee meeting later on today where we will be taking up the annual review of the board director expense reimbursement policy, where we will be discussing this, its gap within the policy when a conflict of interest arises. How do we then deal with it? So that is the item before you. The fiscal impact is just $15.54. And the recommendation is that the board either take the action to grant or deny Vice President Bowman's request not to be charged for the non-refundable meals on December 14th, 2023. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
So there's $100 limit to what a director, and it's interesting that this, I think I had a hamburger that was $28. It was the cheapest hamburger in the place, so I don't want anyone to think I went and looking for the most expensive meal. And I had coffee and a Danish, and it was, I believe, $17 with tax. So I don't know when the $100 limit was set, and it should be enough, but unfortunately, it's not enough, I don't think. I mean, if you have an actual dinner that's not at anyway, I don't know how you fix this, but $100 apparently is not enough anymore, and I'm not even sure it applies. It sounds, if it were higher, would it? So maybe you can take a look at that and bring it back for an adjustment on that subject. But on the $15, I would say that certainly we should forgive the $15 and appreciate Mr. Bauman for bringing it forward so we can make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes, and I'd like to note that that is another item that is a part of the review.
Right.
We have a discussion item for that to address that limit. So that's another thing that we will be discussing today as well at the committee.
Thank you. Director Bloomer? I don't have any questions. Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I don't want to preempt the Finance Committee, but I know that we will look at this afternoon, and we very likely will bring a recommendation to the board to change the policy. You can't, I think even last year in Washington, D.C., it's just impossible to get meals within the guidelines. So, but I do want to say that I think we should deny this request because the policy is what the policy is. And as of now, the policy says that we don't pay that $15. So.
Okay. Vice President Bowman?
No comment.
Okay, and I have no further comments, so I'll be looking for a motion.
I'll move to deny.
All right, I'll look for a second. Seeing no second, I'll look for another motion.
I would just like to interject.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it should ever be an expense to work and travel on behalf of the district. I don't know how this set $15. I didn't quite figure out how that became a thing, but it shouldn't have to dig into your own pocket. So is it because it was on a day that he wasn't able to attend? And
I think Director Sines is probably best to answer that.
Yes, it was due to a day that he was unable to attend due to illness. In the policy, it does state that there may be waiver if you are ill or if there is another emergency, the executive committee can grant exceptions to the policy.
And so we're acting on behalf of the executive
Yes.
committee.
So this is because the executive committee was unable to take an action due to the conflict of interest that existed because Director Bowman
right.
sits on that committee.
Then I would make a motion that we forgive the $15 and that the whatever committee take up that matter of the limit.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you.
I'll second.
I have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
No?
Vice President Bowman,
Abstain.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So we'll move to our long list of action items, starting with,
We have to vote on
oh, I'm sorry, you're right, thank you. And I actually got my new contact lenses.
Oh, we have to vote.
And I have my backups.
it. Cheers today, then.
All right, thank you.
I would move the item 5, the consent calendar, as presented.
All right.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Vice President Bowman to accept the consent calendar. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, on to the action items. 6A, request board action on claim filed by Diego Colorado, and that would be Assistant Manager Johnson for the staff report.
Thank you, President Ortega. So attached for the board is a claim that was filed by Diego Colorado, who I believe is in attendance today. So Mr. Colorado contacted the agency on January 8th requesting the claim form for damages that had occurred to his vehicle. His claim states that on December 14th, while driving in the city of Palm Springs in the Arenas and Avenida Caballeros area, he struck a construction cone that was set up by our construction crews. Our crews were doing work in that area, and he did not realize that the damage was as bad until a vehicle warning light came on. He did take his vehicle to a local dealership, and they inspected and estimated the damage to his grill shutter at $1,879.94. Mr. Colorado did not contact our construction crew on that day. Apparently he was driving to work and had to go to work. And as I said, claims that it was on December 14th. We did not hear from him until January 8th regarding this claim. The fiscal impact, if the board decides to approve the claim, would be $1,879.94 to the agency. If the claim is denied by the board, we will notify the claimant. We will send him a letter, although he is here today. And if it is denied, the claimant may take other actions against the agency. Legal counsel has reviewed this item, and staff recommends that the board of directors deny the claim submitted by Mr. Colorado.
Thank you. So from a procedural perspective, what would be the order? Does the board direct questions to you first? Do we have the claimant come to the podium and then we direct questions to both the claimant and to staff?
I would suggest that you would have the claimant provide his discussion or claim here and his comments, and then we can
And then we can go to
proceed.
questions.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Colorado, would you like to come forward?
Yes, thank you. I have 3 minutes, right?
Yeah, can you pull the microphone down a little bit more? Perhaps? No, you're not actually limited to 3
No,
minutes.
it's 3 minutes for public comment.
Right, but this
This
is,
isn't a public hearing.
so
It's not.
how does that include, how does that include the questioning part of that?
Back and forth.
That's correct.
Okay, so our
He-
questions are only directed towards you?
That's correct. He can give his comment. You'll be able to listen, and then if you have questions, you can ask
Okay,
me or staff or our attorney, and then you can make your decision based on what you hear.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, proceed, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to address you. On my request is respectfully to get reimbursement for the damages to my property due to unattended traffic control on December 14, 2023. On page 35 of the staff report, I have drawn how the traffic control was set up on arenas. I greatly appreciate the agency maintaining its infrastructure that's vital to our community, and including me as a customer. I was driving to work. It was 7:30 a.m. and I followed the traffic control travel pathway as I have drawn on page 35. There must have been a cone unattended on the travel path, which it was the responsibility of the workers to maintain and guarantee a free path. However, it hit my car. I was able to figure out that something was under my car until I got on the next street over, Tackwitz Canyon. And I had a really difficulty pulling out the cone under my car. I was running late for work. I thought I could assume I could absorb the damage to my car because it just looked like the bottom of my car had been punctured by the cone. However, after I drove and got to work in Palm Desert, my warning light came on saying that the grill shutter was damaged. I didn't realize that what a grill shutter was, but I found out later when I took the car to the dealership that it would be $1,800 to fix. On page 30 of your staff report, staff recommends to deny the claim. However, I'm asking the board to please consider the responsibility and the facts that DWA had a crew on site, that it had traffic control unattended, and that it caused damage to my car. And I am respectfully asking you to grant my request for payment for damages. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Gracia, would you have some questions for staff?
No questions, thank you.
All right, Director Bloomer,
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have none.
Okay,
None from me.
okay. I do have a few questions. So there's no, as I understand it, from both the report, from your summary of the report and the comments we just had from the claimant, there was no independent verification by the agency of the damage itself, or verification by the agency, period.
That is correct. We are only aware of the damages based on the photos that were submitted by the claimant.
All right, and so there's been no, has there been any, I mean, this doesn't sound like it's actually an insurance claim per se, although it could have been, I suppose.
I suppose he could have submitted this to his insurance company, who then would have approached the agency and worked through the insurance. Is,
Okay.
I think, the other potential option of how this would play out.
Hmm. So that would have involved some sort of adjuster or some sort of third-party person looking at what's been alleged as far as the damage,
Correct.
typically.
Correct.
Right.
It would be my understanding that his insurance company would would then contact JPIA,
Mhm.
set up an inspection. And then we would have the opportunity to view the vehicle too, I'm sure, and the insurance companies would then work through that process.
And do we, again, since we're not talking to the claimant directly, I'm speaking to you, do we know why there was about a 3-week gap between the time of the incident and the time of the notification?
We are not aware of why there was the gap.
Okay. All right, well, I have no further questions, so I will be looking for a motion.
Mr. President, I move we deny the claim.
Thank you. I'll be looking for a second.
I'll second.
Right. I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
I'm going to abstain. Thank you.
Motion passes.
All right, we can move to item 6B, the request to approve and adopt resolution number 1313, a commemorative display policy.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. Here before you today is a policy that outlines the way that the agency place flags both in the front parking lot and any displays in the back parking lot, as well as the facade displays that you may see on certain holidays that the agency will put flags or banners on the face of the building. That has long been governed by staff decision, and we wanted to have a policy in place that really clearly outlined what was appropriate and when, per the board's perspective. And in addition to that, we elected to fold in commemorative logos. So recognizing some holidays, in addition to the ones where we may have displays on the building, perhaps there are ways to celebrate or express solidarity with a commemorative logo and or outreach. So the aim of this policy is to set the board's view on how staff may manage those things and to allow for some discretion and flexibility into the future. So before you today is the new policy itself, and then Resolution 1313, which would adopt and enact that policy. And if you'd like, I'm able to go through the policy in more detail. But if not, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Is it possible to do sort of a short summary of that? Maybe a couple of minutes?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So again, the purpose is to determine how flags are displayed on property. This policy would allow for a commemorative flag to be flown outside the building solely at the board's discretion. So for example, if the board at a future date elected to celebrate Pride Month or Breast Cancer Awareness Month or Hispanic Heritage Month or any number of holidays or awareness recognition celebrations, the board could make a motion at a meeting and direct staff to celebrate in that way. As it stands now, the policy for flags is such that the United States flag, the California flag, and the Desert Water Agency flag are what is appropriate to be flown out front in the building at any time. And if the board does elect to fly a commemorative flag, it shall be for a period of 30 days. And then in terms of exterior building displays, those we set for the major federal holidays. So we have Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, September 11th, Remembrance, and then Veterans Day. And all of those are typically denoted with the use of very large American flags that folks can see when driving by our building on Gene Autry. The agency also may elect to have a special logo, and this may be for any number of occasions, Earth Day, Juneteenth, some of the holidays and recognitions I mentioned earlier. And those logos would be reviewed by the Conservation and Public Affairs Committee to ensure that they are comfortable with the way the agency's logo is being altered to commemorate these events. And then the last portion of the policy notes the different ways in which the agency may recognize these events, social media, website, billing information, et cetera. So we tried to be comprehensive, but we also built in some flexibility in such that the board could come back and add additional events to the list for commemorative logos, and the board could also come back and add in the flight of a commemorative flag for a set period of time.
Thank you very much. Director Gracia, do you have any questions for Mrs. Metzger?
I have no questions.
Okay. Director Bloomer?
No questions.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I have no questions.
Okay. Vice President
No questions, just a comment. I think this is a wonderful way of showing solidarity to the community.
Thank you. I have no further questions, so I'll be looking for a motion.
I would like to make that motion.
Okay. I'll look for a second.
Second.
All right. So I have a first from Vice President Bowman and a second from Director Gracia to accept the staff recommendation. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 6C, request to approve and adopt the 2024 Legislative and Regulatory Policy Platform. Again, Mrs. Metzger, thank you.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. We are happy to be back before you with another legislative and regulatory policy platform. This is the second year that Desert Water Agency has endeavored such an effort. And we found the first year to be successful, both at the staff level and in speaking with the legislative committee. The platform is a tool that really allows the general manager and the legislative committee to take more swift action and for the committee to really clearly have a firm understanding of what the board's priorities and principles are. So we've put together a short presentation. We'll run through quickly just so I can share with you what has changed since last year. The goals of the platform are the same, so that has not changed, nor has the way that we track bill positions. So those things have remained consistent, as well as the roles and responsibilities. We haven't proposed any changes. I will say, when we get to the alignments section of the presentation, there have been a few changes. We did note a few new organizations. We broadened, previously in our platform, we specifically called out Coachella Valley Water District and Mission Springs Water District, and we've pivoted to say other local water districts because Indio Water Authority, Coachella Water Authority, all of our local partners matter, and we wanted to make sure that was recognized. We also added reference to the National Special Districts Association, since that organization also plays a role. And then we included the Groundwater Management District Association. So we wanted to, and these are not organizations that we will simply parallel their positions, but they are organizations for whom we will seek guidance and explore their positions in determining Desert Water Agency's position. And in terms of relationships, that was a section where we did see some changes. We added other local government agencies into that section. And then we also added Native American tribes as a sovereign entity. We felt that it was appropriate for us as a platform to seek out positive relationships with all of those entities and, work collaboratively to the extent that is practicable and is beneficial to the agency. Directive 1 has stayed entirely the same, Policy Directive 1. And, we tried to prioritize these to some extent, maintaining local control of our water resources and avoiding constraints on operations is obviously very important. And I think it's a good thing that our number one directive has stayed the same. And I will say throughout this packet, most of the directives themselves have stayed the same. There's been a little wordsmithing here and there, and I can point you where as we pass through. So Directive 2, the directive itself has stayed the same, protecting DWA's local imported water supplies. The description underneath has changed ever so slightly. And again, it was really just a little bit of wordsmithing. It was very, very close to the original version, but we just wanted to tighten up the language and make sure that for General Manager Kraus and Assistant General Manager Johnson, it was really clear so that if someone came to them and asked them for a letter, that directive would really speak to them and allow them to make a judgment call. Policy Directives 3 is very similar in terms of the fact that the directive itself did not change, but the description underneath it changed ever so slightly. So Directive 3, maintain or improve DWA's ability to efficiently conduct business. We did reference in this iteration providing an essential service rather than just providing water service, because we felt in our discussion with Bob Reeb that the fact that we are doing something that's absolutely necessary for the public is really important to underline in the policy. Policy Directive 4, we did add a clause here, when advantageous, seek external funding. I think Assistant General Manager Johnson and I have been through the ringer a number of times with, FEMA and other grant applications where the process of obtaining the funding almost negates the amount of funding you receive. So we wanted to add that language in so that it was clear that we shouldn't be doing this blindly, but strategically. And then Directive 5, the language stayed the same, but we did pivot. This previously was not identified expressly as a directive for DWA at the state level. We left it more broad last time. But in speaking with both Bob Reeb and Chris Pauley this year, it seems that the possibility of something like this happening at the state level is actually pretty tangible, and it's something we've seen within the past 5 years and could very well come back again. Whereas at the federal level, it's kind of a potential looming threat. So in terms of these directives, focusing our efforts, we really wanted to kind of keep an eye on what mattered and shut out the noise to some extent. So the directive is the same, the language adds by the state, and then at the top you see it's denoted as a state directive. And then on the next page, you'll see another state directive, and it has remained the same, the directive itself. It relates to our water use objective. This year is going to be really pivotal with that regulation, and the agency is going to be working with DWR and the State Water Resources Control Board and possibly other stakeholders and legislators to make sure that the regulation is enacted in such a way that reflects DWA's local conditions and we feel is appropriate. So look forward to doing a lot of work in that space this year. I think it's going to be one that consumes quite a bit of time and bandwidth for the agency and agencies around California. And then our last directive here has remained entirely the same. This is something we have been working on, Mr. Kraus, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years in a row now, really pressing to try and get bipartisan legislation to get our incentive checks that we give to customers tax exempt. They are at the state level, but not yet at the federal level. So folks, if they receive a $2,000 check from Desert Water Agency for removing their grass, that is actually calculated into their taxable income. So even if we're giving them $2, you know, it's essentially like they're getting a 22% haircut on that, which is less than ideal. And there are energy incentives that are exempt at the federal level. So it really shouldn't be too difficult to get this accomplished. And every year we get excited, and every year it looks like it might happen. And then unfortunately it doesn't. But I will say, when you all, I believe Directors Bloomer and Secretary Treasurer McKenna will be in DC for the Aqua Conference, and we are trying to establish a meeting with Senator Padilla and really expressing to him the importance of this will be wonderful. So that's the extent of the policy platform. We are doing another 1-year platform just like last year, but in the future, I would recommend that we look at a 2-year platform. The legislative session, both at the state and federal level, they'll be in a new session next year. So we didn't want to switch to 2 years at this point because it's mid-session, but I think the timing will work really well next year to align with the new legislative session. And with that, I would recommend that the Board of Directors approve the legislative and regulatory policy platform for 2024.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have some questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay.
Excellent report, though, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. Director Bloomer,
I don't have any questions. Thank
thank
you.
you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Well, I have a question and a comment. On item 7, Director Bloomer and I sat in Senator Feinstein's office last year and were assured that that would come forth. You know, that she had introduced the bill the year before. It died without being passed. So it died again. So we'll be back. We'll try that again. On item 7, would you scroll back to number 7? Sorry, number 5. You know, it's long been one of my objectives to try and find some low-income assistance for water bills. This says we will support it if it's funded sustainably by the state. But in every other instance of utilities, it's actually funded by the customers. There's some kind of surcharge, low-income assistance. It's on every bill except water bill. So I'm not sure that I like the way this policy is written. Could you comment on that?
Yes, sir. So Proposition 26 is written in such a way that water agencies don't have the same flexibility as other utilities in charging one customer to subsidize another customer.
Right.
So we have our hands tied a little bit there. That said, the funded sustainably by the state speaks to us hoping to see some sort of budget line item that would address a low income rate assistance program. The state has been working for years. I've personally attended, half a dozen workshops on their efforts thus far. But the water tax component, it just, to us, is very challenging because the administration in getting it set up and collecting it is very burdensome. And on top of that, there are concerns about legal challenges. And I'd welcome Piero to speak any further to the constraints that water agencies are under in our ability to support low-income customers.
And that's correct, Director McKenna. I hope you can hear me okay. And good morning, everybody. That is correct. Prop 26, unfortunately, ties our hands a little bit in terms of what we can charge customers in order to subsidize programs that benefit other customers, especially low income. And I think that's why staff correctly worded policy directive number 5 to give you some flexibility, but it's not necessarily violating the law.
I would like if the staff would come to us and say, here's an idea that the state has come up with, rather than just vetoing under this policy. Let's discuss it further, if we could do that.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
No comments from me.
Okay. And just excuse me, a follow-up on the rate assistance for low-income customers. I mean, we do participate in some programs that do provide some relief, maybe not at the rate level, but certainly at the billing level. And it's my understanding that those funds come from non-water rate revenue sources that the agency has at its disposal. Maybe that's not the right word, but things like leases for cell towers and that kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's important that the record reflect that there is a program that Desert Water Agency established back in 2016 called Help to Others, which is a program that the agency funds with non-rate revenue, employee contributions, vendor contributions, and public contributions. And customers can apply to get up to $200 a year in funding to offset their water bills. And we've done some calculations, and I think the $200 a year, it's not small change. It's 10 to 20% of a moderate annual bill. So there is some reprieve available. There's also county-run programs. So it's a program called LIWAP. There are other assistance programs available. We work very closely with United Way. Not only do they manage the Help to Others program, but they will also pay additional components of water bills when customers are unable to. So we do work with low-income customers to the best of our ability to help support them.
Thank you. So with that, I'll be looking for a motion.
I move we accept staff recommendation on this item.
Thank you. I have a first and a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Director Bloomer. So with that, we can proceed with a roll call vote.
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 6D, request to approve and adopt resolution number 1314, a non-billing dispute and appeals policy. Mrs. Metzger.
Thank you all. This policy has been in the works since a few months back. At a Conservation and Public Affairs Committee meeting, we had an appeal, and I think everyone in the room was a little bit uncomfortable with how we left it. The person who was appealing staff's decision was quite unhappy, even after having quite a bit of time with the committee to discuss their issue and review photos and videos and such. And we talked a bit about the fact that these non-billing related disputes are handled differently than the policy that's outlined for disputes and appeals related to billing issues pursuant to SB 998. So there's actual law that dictates how we handle certain disputes and appeals that are related to payments and shutoffs, but there are a large number of items that are not addressed in that way, and conservation incentives tend to be the most common thing that folks will dispute. It's very easy and clear to see a staff decision. You get an email that essentially says you're rejected or you're not approved. So we have historically handled those at the committee level. The Conservation and Public Affairs Committee would meet and review the circumstances of the appeal and direct staff or provide their perspective, and then staff would elect to deny or approve the claim. And in all my years working with the agency, it had never really gone beyond that. Everyone really accepted the committee's decision as final, but there wasn't a real formal policy to point people to say, yes, this is your last resort, or no, you may go to the full board. So we wanted to really clearly outline what the policy is. And it's not just conservation program appeals. We've had customers call and complain about, an air vac being sited outside of their property. We've had folks upset about decisions related to, where a fire hydrant might be. So it can come up from time to time for a variety of other reason. So what we did is we established a policy that very closely mirrors what is done for billing issues. And what that looks like is a customer submits a dispute in writing, which is a really easy web form they can fill out on the website. And then it goes for a staff review at the manager level, at which point the agency staff issues a decision in writing and replies to the customer. The customer then has a set period of time. They have 10 business days to appeal that decision. And if they elect to appeal the decision, it would come before the full board of directors. So I will say that under this policy, it is possible that the board sees an increase in the number of these types of complaints, because essentially everything that was previously handled at the committee level related to conservation would then come to the full board, and it would entirely circumvent the committee. But we did appreciate the consistency and uniformity that handling these things together brought. I think there's value there in having a very clear, transparent process that we can describe very easily to customers, and they're not saying, you know, why am I treated one way and someone else is treated a different way. The one thing I will say is the item that follows, 6E, is seemingly unrelated, the agency's water shortage contingency plan enacting ordinance. And the reason that is here, the reason we are looking to supersede Ordinance 72 is because it presently dictates that appeals are handled in a specific way, and it actually outlines the appeal going to the executive committee and the customer having no reprieve to the full board of directors. So with this first action that staff is requesting, the adoption of Resolution 1314, we are not handling water waste citations and appeals. That will be handled with the next item. This is just simply for all non-billing disputes, save those water waste citations. And with that, I would recommend that the board take action and adopt Resolution 1314.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No questions.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have none.
Okay, Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Yeah, none from me at this point. So I'll look for I'll look for a motion to accept staff's recommendation for this item.
Mr. President, I move we adopt Resolution 1314, a non-billing dispute appeals policy as presented by staff.
Thank you. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So our final action item, 6E, which we already got a bit of a preview. That's a request to approve and adopt ordinance number 77 to update appeals for water waste citations under regulations restricting the use of water during threatened or existing water shortage conditions. Mrs. Metzger.
Thank you, President Ortega. I promise to be quick here. We wanted to set the stage for a really clear policy both on water shortage contingency planning, water waste citations, restrictions, and then, of course, this new, more consistent way to handle disputes and appeals. So what General or Assistant General Manager Johnson decided was that one new ordinance on this issue would be the cleanest way. And I really agree. I'm very pleased we're doing it this way, because the alternative that we discussed would leave us with Ordinance 72 and then an amending ordinance that only amended one section of the ordinance. So basically, every time we reference Ordinance 72, which is actually on our website in a couple different places, because it actually has impacts when we're in one of those water shortage stages, we would have had to double cite everything, and it would have been very confusing for customers. So I think this is a great path forward. We've got Ordinance 77, which will replace in its entirety Ordinance 72, However, the only change is the section 8.6 that outlines the procedures for hearing an appeal. And essentially, we just reference the agency's policy, which was just adopted to ensure consistency. So if the agency's policy on handling appeals changes in the future, Ordinance 77 would align with that. So we tried to retain some flexibility going forward in the event that maybe the board becomes overburdened with these complaints and we need to pivot in the future. It won't require another action to redo the ordinance related to water waste citations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and do recommend that the board adopt ordinance number 77 to update the agency's water use restrictions. And if the board does so, the ordinance in its full will be circulated in a publication to conform with the agency's requirements for ordinances.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
None.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
A kind of procedural question. The ordinance allows the agency to determine that a criminal offense may have been committed. What's the procedure for deciding whether it's a civil penalty? When does it become criminal?
I will say we have worked for a number of years on these types of issues and have never gotten to that stage. We've never even really gotten to the stage of shutting someone's water off, which I would assume would come before we were to look at any criminal proceedings. We've had some pretty flagrant displays, flagrant and persistent displays of water waste in which customers were very resistant to compliance, but they have been so few and far between. The overwhelming majority of the time, we don't get to that level. The ordinance does preserve the agency's ability to pursue things at a criminal level, but I think we would exhaust every other remedy before we were to go there. But I welcome Piero's thoughts on maybe some instances in which that might be appropriate and how we might proceed there.
All right. Yeah, just curious. Thanks.
Absolutely. If you would like me to address it, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, the agency doesn't have a direct prosecutorial role, but the agency can engage other agencies as well, both state and local, in order to pursue a criminal complaint in certain instances. The agency also has the ability, pursuant to this ordinance, in some instances, as Ms. Mexer pointed out, where there's a persistent violation, to initiate I would compare it to sort of like a code enforcement proceeding. A code enforcement proceeding by a city is very similar in that process. And that's the quote unquote criminal procedure that I think the ordinance is referring to. It's a type of sort of code enforcement type of proceeding.
Thank you. Do you have any more on that?
I like the provision that says we can turn the water off for 48 hours. I mean, that should get their attention. So hopefully we never get to asking the district attorney to prosecute someone. But the idea that we should shut it off, and in an egregious case, we should, and with maximum publicity. So I like the policy.
The state unfortunately requires us to follow certain procedures before we turn a utility off.
May I speak?
Yes.
I will say that I think it's a good idea that we have, the escalation of options available. It's very interesting, sometimes things that present, and maintaining that flexibility, I think, is optimal, although, hopefully we never go there. I think that this plan also projects out a future where we're looking at a 50% water reduction, and trying to imagine ourselves in that time might look very, very different than today. If we're in an extreme shortage rationing scenario, people might start, acting a little bit more aggressively and precariously around water. So I think that Mike and I originally drafted Ordinance 72, I think we were just trying to put our hats on and think about what a scenario under an extreme shortage might look like. And that was a part of addressing it. I will say, I think the changes we're making related to how the appeals are handled actually improve our ability to ever pursue criminal prosecution if we needed to, because instead of being handled at the executive committee level, it will be handled at a board meeting, which is recorded. So there'll be a better record.
Thank you. General Manager Kraus, did you want to say something?
Add one thing. We have done we've pursued criminal action against people that have trespassed on our properties. We have quite a bit of property, especially in our surface water intake areas. So we've done that, and also for theft and vandalism. So we have a lot of that kind of thing that goes on where we would pursue a criminal violation. So I think it's a good idea to keep it in there.
Okay, thank you. All right, Director Gracia, do you have any questions? Oh, wait, we already did that, sorry. We were at Secretary Treasurer McKenna, and now we're at Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Okay, and none from me. So with that, I'll look for a motion to accept staff's recommendation for ordinance number 77.
So moved.
Okay, and I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. May we have a first from Vice President Bowman and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Right, we can move to item 7, which is our General Manager's report. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Ortega. I'd like to do something a little different here for this report. So the first two items, especially the first item with the Tyler Technologies, this is something that Director Sines is very heavily involved with, and I thought that maybe she could present this to the board. It's something that she should be very proud of. She's initiated us moving towards this, so I thought it would be appropriate for her to provide an update on this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In June 2022, the Board of Directors authorized us to contract with Tyler Technologies for their enterprise ERP solution. And this ERP solution includes our financials modules, human resources, payroll, utility billing, asset management, really a major overhaul on our systems. The ERP system will allow us to replace rather severely outdated technology that we've been using since about 1984 or 85, I believe, is when it was last implemented. And of course, we've had a few other implementations in the middle. We've been through a couple of different payroll programs, HR programs, but all in all, the core of our operating systems, they are all 1980s technology. And this will allow us to enable effective collaboration and enhance our customer service capabilities and our billing and reporting capabilities, and provide for a single source of truth for the agency's data. Because right now we do utilize several different systems in different departments, and everyone has their own data that they need in a little bit different way, but this is really to compile it all, to help to compile it all together so that we can make sure that we are all accessing the same information and it's all been validated and correct. In February 2023, implementation began on the financial modules themselves. This includes our accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing, our general ledger, our project accounting, and our general billing components. And those modules were implemented over approximately 91 days. That involved approximately 12 agency staff that were heavily involved across several different departments, and 5 individual Tyler implementation consultants, in addition to our Tyler project manager as well. And in December, we spent 3 days here in this room with agency staff where we cycled them all through and gave them trainings on the new financial modules so that we would be ready to go live using the system. I'm happy to report on January 2nd, we went live on our financial modules, marking the completion of phase 1 and of the implementation. And I also would like to note that we are right on target as far as budget goes with the implementation. We did not go over any amount of days within our contract, so we are right on target with our Tyler contract for the implementation days. And up next, we have 2 more phases left. Phase 2 is going to include our utility billing, so how we actually bill our water and sewer customers, and our human resources and payroll modules. Those begin next month. And then our phase 3, which is our enterprise asset management, is anticipated to begin implementation October 2024.
Yeah, I just had to say that that's a huge milestone that we've just hit. So just proud that we were able to make it through this. And I thought I was told that Tyler said that the implementation was one of the smoothest that they've had. So
yeah, they've said on multiple occasions how happy they were to work with our staff, and they've been exceptional throughout the whole implementation process, indicating that they've been on top of everything, meeting our milestones, meeting our due dates. And it's been one of the smoothest ones that they've ever had. And they've said this is the way that it's supposed to go. So they've been very happy with us.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Director Science, on that. And then, so the next item, I thought Director Science might be best to give you an update here on the unclaimed operating fund money.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. In November of 2023, the Board of Directors authorized staff to transfer the unclaimed monies into the operating fund for general use. Now, these unclaimed monies, as it was previously presented in the staff report at that time, these are refunds that went uncashed that we couldn't track down the individuals. We went through extensive effort to try and get the money that was owed to them. And we then published notice of the unclaimed money on the agency's website with a listing of everybody who they belong to, as well as the amounts. And we also published that list, a notice in the public record on November 14th and November 21st, as per government code requirements, where we are required to give public notice, required to wait a waiting period, which is 45 to 60, no longer than 60 days, and that we will review and process any verifiable claims of which the agency received no claims. And the agency, at the conclusion of the waiting period that was provided, which was 49 days on January 2nd, was the end of that waiting period. The agency transferred $68,580.70 to the operating fund for general use.
Ready?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Science. Right, the next item is regarding our annual employee awards breakfast. I believe Director McKenna and possibly and Bowman, did you both attend that last year? Yes, so we are having that breakfast again on the 25th. Again, we'll recognize workers who've reached safe milestones and driving records, and we'll have a presentation on capital improvement projects and so forth. And I believe this is going to be catered by, I think Lulu's is catering that breakfast this year. So, and hopefully they show up this year. Last year we had a little problem with the caterer. They didn't show up, so we had to get some donuts.
All right.
Next items is our human resource meeting activities. And Ms. Hopping is not here today. Just had some construction inspector interviews, and we also conducted an interview for our engineering position. And Our next item is just want to keep the board updated on our shade parking structures that were budgeted for the fiscal year 2022, 2023. That budget includes for some new carports that will cover the 20 parking spaces in the middle of the visitor parking lot. So part of the first process is we had to clear out the trees, and there were some light structures out there which were completed last week. And the structures are expected to begin being installed on January 22nd, and they should take about 2 to 3 weeks, I believe so. Then we have our system leak data. You can see, so the items, the Luella and Andreas Road, those are part of our newly awarded replacement project to Borden. So those will hopefully be coming off this list once those mains are installed. Avenida Caballeros was to start this month. There was some delays on some of the material. They thought the valves were going to be in stock, or they were finally going to receive them. They got word that there's still a little delay. However, we're anticipating that work to start by the end of this month. And then Lugo Drive and Vista Chino, those are both being designed by engineering staff right now. And just a list of our activities again, a lot of activities in regards to tribal mediation. And we had a legislative ad hoc committee meeting. Again, had engineering interviews. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No questions.
All right.
Thanks.
Vice President or Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Well, a couple of comments.
Okay.
Vice President Baumann and I are on that technology committee, and we've been watching the implementation of that ERP. And I have to say, it's going very smoothly. These things can often be disastrous. So we avoided disaster. We're going well. I'm happy with that. I'll mention the awards breakfast. That was very useful last year. We were both new, and it gave us an introduction to the staff. I was tremendously impressed by the camaraderie and the safety consciousness of the staff. So I will be out of town this year. Someone else should go. You know, if you haven't been to that, I would encourage you to go. And yes, maybe there will be food this time. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Could we use the unclaimed money for low-income assistance?
That would be a non-rate revenue source. And we do budget every year to be able to provide to help to others. Well, that is a consideration within the budgeting process. So that is money that could be used. Also, leases and late fee revenues are also non-rate revenues, and so those are the available sources to us.
Is the amount that we got this year parallel to prior years, more or less?
Of the unclaimed funds?
Yes.
The unclaimed funds, that is an accumulation of 10 years. So that is, it's not representative of a single.
Yeah, I thought it was
activity.
just 1 year.
Yeah,
so
it is.
10.
It is an accumulation of 10 years, and we are putting on a schedule to address it approximately every 3 to 4 years because it doesn't accumulate to an amount that is justifies the effort.
Right, understood. And secondly, the shade structure sounds really wonderful. Will there be solar panels or anything of that on top of the shade structure?
At this time, there will not. However, we can in the future add them to the structures. There's also the ability to add the solar and charging stations could also be installed out there.
Wonderful. That's it.
Thank you. I have no further comments or questions, so we can move on to item 8, Director's Reports on Meetings and Events attended on behalf of the agency. And just as a reminder to each of the directors, please let us know the meeting and the date, and as you give your summary of what happened that day. We'll start with Director Gracia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a few, actually. On January 5th, I attended a virtual tour of Orange County's groundwater replenishment system. It was a pretty good tour for being conducted by Zoom, I guess. The world's largest advanced water purification system for potable reuse, and it featured the general manager of the Orange County Water District. On January 9th, I attended the CVWD board meeting. A few interesting things that happened there. General Manager Barrett shared his frustration at not being able to have his nominee approved by IID to the Coachella Valley Energy Commission. And the Coachella Valley Water District's Federal Affairs and Advocacy team provided a year in review. They are Ann Schwab and Lowry Cook. They are both with Best and Krieger. Gave a pretty good review of their legislative items that even are of concern to our district as well. They approved membership in the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce, and they bought 4 new dump trucks. I guess that will, I think they had been trying to buy them for years, and apparently because of COVID and all of the, battery-powered problems, and they were finally able to figure out a way forward and bought 4 new dump trucks. And on January 10th, the Aqua Water Use Sufficiency Subcommittee meeting was first time I've attended one of those, and it was interesting dialogue. More than 100 people on that meeting, and Ms. Metzger was one of them, and our Sacramento, I don't know, lobbyist, Mr. Reeb. Is that how you say it? R-E-E-B, Reeb or Reeby? I don't know. Anyway, he was on the at the meeting as well. It was a very interesting, educational, and glad I attended that. And then the Desert Valley Builders Association meeting this past week with interesting. There was a member, representatives from every single water district in the desert in attendance, including the tribal water authority. And Julie Lawton was the speaker, and she gave a presentation on what we can expect in the future in home building in the Coachella Valley, which was interesting. With the twist of women in building was interesting. She, I guess they're starting a new, the Desert Valley Builders Association is sponsoring a, where they're going to take young women, girls, high school girls, and get them jobs in industry, in the construction industry, internships. It sounds like it might be a little sexist, but I guess that might be okay. I don't know, but it sounded a little like no boys allowed. So there you are.
All right, thank you. Director Bloomer.
The only thing I attended was on January 8th, we had a tribal mediation meeting, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I attended Mission Springs Water District study session on Thursday, January 11th. They appointed Brian Macy as their general manager for a period of 3 years. I'm sure we all wish him well. I think the most interesting thing I noticed was that Mission Springs Water District is seeking additional time for the implementation of any new maximum contaminant level. And obviously they have chromium-6 in their sites. They have a chromium-6 problem. And the state is likely to introduce a new standard and give them, I think, 6 months to fix it. So they're asking for 2.5 years. I have to limit really what I say about chromium-6 because it's their district, but the chromium-6 level at my house is in the order of 27 parts per million. And I'm not happy with that. So the sooner they do that, the better. That's all.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, on the 3rd, I attended a technology transformation via Zoom because I didn't have it on my calendar. And it showed that technology worked, that I could zoom in and there it was. And I echo Director McKenna's comments on the implementation of the whole new system for DWA is phenomenal. On the 4th, I had a tribal mediation Zoom with CVWD, and on the 8th, we had a face-to-face, and then on the 11th, executive committee.
Thank you. So I attended 2 meetings since our last time together, both related to the Sustainability Commission. The first had to do with, primarily that was on January 4th, and that had to do with recycling primarily, and a large part of that, and of course I spoke during public comment and mentioned that recycling also includes water, so that should be part of in their sites as well. But their focus was primarily on Palm Springs disposal service. And one of the interesting things that, well, doesn't directly impact us or maybe doesn't have a whole lot of direct relevance to us is that Palm Springs disposal service has been seeking an extension of their agreement with the city of Palm Springs. And I believe that actually went before City Council last week. But they were meeting, that part of that meeting with the Sustainability Commission was to discuss what that might look like. And the intent for that extension is to allow that agency, well, I guess they're not technically an agency, but that service, to recoup the cost of vehicles that are that have no emissions. This was an opportunity for them to do that without raising their rate. Because it gave them a longer time to capture that revenue that they could use to then offset the costs of those new vehicles. So I don't think that there's something directly in there for us, but it was sort of an interesting concept on how to achieve that. And then on the 10th of January, a meeting which was about climate action. By this time, we had received the legislative analyst report from the previous Friday. There was a time where Mrs. Metzger and I had met with the commission, I believe it was in late September, early October, to talk to them about these draft rules that were being considered at that time and still being considered at that time by the State Water Resource Control Board. And now we had a legislative analyst report that echoes in large part, and I believe all the directors have seen a copy of that I believe Mr. Johnson emailed that to all of us when that report came out on Friday the 4th. But I wanted to use that as an opportunity to follow up again with the commission and both thank the city of Palm Springs for its support of the Desert Water Agency's position on those draft regulations, where we did receive a letter from the city manager that was sent in during the comment period. And essentially those comments that are found in the legislative analyst report largely reflect the water agency's position. In fact, probably most water agencies within the state of California, their position that the burden, if you will, the regulatory action being sought in the draft was actually above and beyond what the law requires and what the DWR had recommended initially. So there was seemed to be some overreach there. The time frame is incredibly short to start becoming compliant. It's basically 2 years at this point. because of the way the legislation was written, even though the State Water Resources Control Board is at least 2 years behind in issuing those draft regulations. But water agencies at this point are not given any relief in terms of meeting those requirements, which we still don't know exactly what they are, but we have a good idea what they might look like. And that the burden, a large part of this burden would fall on lower income clients within all these different water agencies. They would be bearing the burden of the additional costs primarily. And that, again, was supported by the legislative analyst report. And the part that I found probably the most interesting, and you can talk about what the intent of the legislation initially was in 2018. And I think those are good objectives in terms of water conservation. But at the end of the day, the legislative analyst report, in summary, said we are talking about conserving about 1% of the water used in the state, and we're talking about a cost of I think it was about $15 billion in order to do that. And is that really the best way? Is that really the best use of $15 billion to save 1% of our annual water use? And what happens to that water? What does it get used for? How is it banked? Where does it get distributed? Those are all big questions that don't seem to be answered by the legislation or the draft regulation. So I did want to loop back again with the Sustainability Commission, let them know, this was the conversation we had in October. This is where, this is the result of the Legislative Analyst Office. This largely supports what our position has been. And also to thank the city, although apparently it wasn't directly through the Sustainability Commission, for funding for a speaker series that's been a grant that was given by the city to Oswit Land Trust to do a speaker series on sustainability. And I will actually be presenting on behalf of the Water Agency a week from Thursday at 3 o'clock at the Palm Springs Animal Shelter on what this agency has done and is doing to support the health of the aquifer as well as conservation. So with that, unless there are any questions, we can move on to item number 9, which is director's comments or requests. And Director Gracia.
Thank you. I have no comments or requests.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No comments or requests.
And Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have none, thanks.
Okay. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, I have a couple comments. I'd like to say, as a board, we did good board work today. And good board work involves looking at policies that staff brings forward to make the agency better, to discuss it, to vote on them, and to accept them. When I was in the tech industry working for Toshiba, there was a term that the Japanese used called Kaizen. And that term means constant and never-ending improvement. And that's exactly what we are doing here at DWA. I appreciate that the staff is looking forward, creating policies for us as board members to look over their shoulder and to approve, so that the district will be healthy financially, that we'll have water for our residents, and that we're well run. So some of the policies today that we voted on, for example, we updated 72 by going to 77. That's Kaizen. That's constant and never-ending improvement. Even the policy that we dealt with on the non-refundable expense approval. These were all new that came about in the last year, and we're now continuing to refine them. And I think that is awesome, and that's good board work. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I'd actually go beyond that. It's not just good board work, it's great staff work too. So bringing it forward in the first place. I have nothing further to add. So with that, we'll close this part of the public meeting. It is 9:25. If we could meet as the board in closed session at 9:35. And thank you for the public in attending. And we'll be back at the end of closed session to close the public meeting. Thank you. Are we back on? So we're going to move on to item 11, which is reconvening into open session. And I can report that we had no actionable items in closed session. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 10:20 and be back here in, I believe, 3 weeks. Thank you very much.